Look at this beauty, huh? What you are looking at is probably the world's most advanced and complete level of consciousness measurement table or scale. And don't worry if it seems overwhelming, because I will go through everything and it will make everything really clear. If you listen to this video, you will understand every single detail of this scale. So let's start with the beginning. I'll start from the top left, just like reading a book. So this is a map of consciousness projected as it is projected through the ego-mind belief prism. And above the model you can see a scale with the descriptions and the levels. I can start with describing these levels and then I'll move my way down. So obviously at the bottom you have the demonic level below 200 and down until 20. And this is the lowest you can go in consciousness. And this is where you find, especially at the bottom, you find very nasty creatures like, serial killers, murderers, very violent people, very self-destructive, drug addicts, people are possessed, and these kind of things. And you also find the Illuminati, or what you want, the elite, the occult elite, the globalist kind of people, the top echelon of the globalists, the Satan worshipping and Lucifer worshipping kind of people you find at these levels. But those people, they thrive at those levels. They're not depressed by being there in that sense, because they are projecting all negativity onto the world and other people, and they manage to do that so they can actually thrive. And they actually are born on the negative path. They want to get down the scale, not up, because they are born on the negative path, and that's the spiritual goal for them, is going down. So they actually thrive at those low levels, at the demonic levels. They actually want to be possessed. That's why they have the rituals they have, because when they perform rituals and sacrifices and all that, they can they can spike down so low that they become possessed by almost demonic entities, or the negative collective ego, or what you want to call it, and that makes them feel really powerful. So that's the demonic level, and the lower level of it. In the upper end of the demonic level, you have like criminals, kind of violent people, hooligans, gangs, gang criminals, and those kind of people. So anything below 200 is considered destructive to life and without integrity. And breaching the 200 level, it's a major deal for most people. And many in the truth movement and in the spiritual movement, they have actually tasted, they have been in the demonic level probably a little time in their life, maybe for some months, maybe for a year or two, in their teens or early adulthood usually. And that's when you probably had a turning point in your life. You felt, you were really depressed and messed up, and so suddenly you managed to turn your life around somehow. You started doing maybe yoga, meditation, and suddenly things turned, and you sort of really quickly developed away from all that negativity and depression that you used to have before. And that's very common for many people on the path. They will sort of dip down into that demonic level and sort of get a taste of the hell flames, and then they will sort of be scared very quickly up the scale. So it's a saying that says that you have to plant your roots in hell to get to heaven, and that's sort of what that means. You have to get a taste of the opposite so you can know what it is, sort of, and then you can move very quickly in the other direction towards the light and the higher frequencies. So if you're trapped, and many people were probably trapped for a while in the demonic level as a light worker, or as a person who really is good and not belong in those levels, you will feel very depressed, and you will take in a lot of negativity from the mass consciousness while you're there, and it will lodge itself in your subconscious, and you will be packed by all this. So you basically go down there to take on a part of the, it's like a big pool of dirt, and you're taking on your part of it. And then as you move up the scale, you are cleansing it and removing it both from yourself and also from the mass consciousness. So you're helping to clean up the mass consciousness. That's what has been going on for many years already with the whole truth movement, lightworking movement, or spiritual movement. So you breach the 200 level and you feel like you finally you have head above water again. You can actually see the light, or below 200 is like there is no light. You're just below the ground, and you can't see anything. And then when you reach the light and you can see the light again, you can find a way to orient yourself towards it. So you finally get a leading star again. And people who sort of belong in the level of animality, as I call it, that's because most light workers, they are born at around in the 300 level, and then they dip down into the 200s or lower 200s during teenage years, and then they go quickly up again as they grow more conscious. But if you're native to the animality level, as you might say, then that's basically kind of rough working class people who are run mostly by instinct. They don't have much emotions. They just they're run by instinct, like kind of not like exactly like animals, but kind of like animals, animalistic in a certain sense. And then you move into emotionality, where you sort of came from. You came into this planet at that level, most likely, if you're listening to this. Because all the light workers I have checked, they always born in the 300 somewhere, usually. Very, very common that they are. So then you're quickly going, because you went down, you're sort of developing higher than you were born. That's the whole point, right? But in the emotionality level, you will release a lot of all that heavy emotions that you took in by dipping down into the lower levels. So it's sort of a big cleansing, very chaotic, can be big cleansing kind of level, and you're releasing all those negative emotions from your subconscious. And once that storm is over, or at least calmed down, then you reach the 400s, which is the level of reason. And this is a level where the intellect is more in charge than emotions, emotionality. You become more of an intellectual, and you use reason to orient yourself in reality and through life. And this level of reason, 400s, has a lot of very smart, scientists and artists and philosophers and these kind of people. They usually find themselves in the higher 400s. And the paradox of 400s is that you can become kind of trapped in the intellect. It's like, it's very safe, it's secure, you feel strong in that kind, but it's also kind of a prison. And if you manage to breach out of that prison, you breach into the 500s, into real unconditional love, which not all that many people have done at this point. I mean, I guess maybe around 5% of the population or something, maybe less than that, I'm not sure, I haven't checked in a while, but anyway, it's not that common yet for people to get all the way up there. And for a good example of a person in the 400s that's quite famous these days, Jordan Peterson. He's a very classical, very well-read intellectual kind of guy, but he's also kind of stiff and dry sometimes. I mean, he's not. You don't sense this. He's a lot of love, right? But he's really smart, and he's a typical intellectual. So he's a classic example of the 400s. But anyway, the level of love, there you let go of a lot of the knowledge and the intellectual way of orienting yourself in the world. You're relying much more on intuition now, and the heart. You become more heart-based, and you orient yourself in life by feeling what is right through intuition. And as you develop and mature in that level, you can come closer to the first level of enlightenment, and you can maybe even make the jump into non-duality, because now you have prepared yourself so much that now you're sort of ready. So if it's meant to happen, it can happen, and you make the jump into the first level of enlightenment, which is non-duality. And that's where you the subject becomes the object, and the seer becomes the seen. It's all the paradoxes meet at this level, and it's basically the first level of what is traditionally called enlightenment. It's not full enlightenment yet, but it's a very big step. And in this level of non-duality, you start to sense that instead of feeling like you are a body or a person in the universe, you start to sense that you are the universe, that contains a person, or you are the space that contains a person, instead of feeling that you are a person in space. So it's a reversal of the whole way of perceiving, in a fundamental way. And if you reach this level, you can mature further, go through many high-level paradoxes and changes, which I cannot go into at this time, but then you can reach full enlightenment at level 1000, which is the purest level of consciousness that there is. So that's basically the scale, description of the scale of consciousness. So let's look at the model below. So to the right, you can see a written soul/consciousness. That's just basically consciousness, or your soul, the pure consciousness, and it's being reflected, or maybe it's being focused through the lens of the ego, which is this pink square, and then you have all the layers of the mind, which is also distorting the pure consciousness. So you project your consciousness through all these belief systems that you have buried in yourself, depending on where you are, obviously, and then it projected out onto the mirror of physical reality, and the interpretation goes back. So what you see, the reality you get, basically, is based upon what kind of level of consciousness you're at. A person in the demonic level will obviously, project a very different projection out onto the world, and he will perceive and see a very different reality than a person who is, in the level of love. So that's what is meant by this model to show, is that what people think of as karma, for example, is just, your personal karma is just how much stuff do I have repressed in my subconscious mind, and that's all this. If let's say you're at the orange level here, that means you don't have all that in front of you. That's gone. If you started out at the demonic level and you integrated your way back into the orange level, all that in front is gone. So now your leading edge of your consciousness is here, at the orange, but you still have all this behind you that is still repressed. So this white tree, this white line is like to illustrate that the focused consciousness, when you just have the core of the ego left, is like a laser beam. It's very clear, but it's still focused through the ego, and then it splits off into many branches, more and more branches as the deeper you go and the more stuff and belief systems you hold, and the way to every one of these belief system is kind of a core belief system. So if you integrate, let's say you can actually integrate, you could in theory just integrate this level here and cut the whole mind tree at once. And for some people that actually happens. It's not unheard of. I mean, Eckhart Tolle, for example, he found himself, if you read his book The Power of Now, he describes how he got enlightened, and he found himself he was so depressed and messed up, he was basically in the demonic level, and he just collapsed on the floor ready to kill himself, basically. And when he came to himself again, he woke up again. Everything had changed. The whole mind tree had been cut by the root, and he was basically into non-duality. So that is possible. You can integrate everything at once like he did, but not everybody does that. I mean, it depends on how your life plan is and what journey you're set up for yourself. But in general, you work more progressively in leaps and bounds. But let's say you're at the orange level, you can easily dig into, suddenly start working at the blue level, and let's say you integrate all the beliefs here, then you cut the whole tree from this level and suddenly you jump from orange to blue. That's possible also. You don't have to go like one little step at a time like that. It can, big things can happen without you even knowing how it happened, but you just have to work on what you get, basically, what comes up in your mind when you meditate and throughout your day. So anyway, so you work yourself progressively backwards, so your mind becomes more and more clear. You project less and less of false beliefs onto the world, and you get more of a clear vision, and then you come to the core of the ego. Then you have a very clear, you have a very clear vision of the world. You see things very clearly, but you're still, caught in the separation of the ego. But if you make the jump into non-duality, then the ego is annihilated, and it's actually merged back into the soul and the consciousness. So now your identity is here. It's in the soul consciousness instead of being somewhere here. So then you have caught up with the leading edge of reality, basically, because if you're here, you're caught up in past stuff that has been repressed and has not been dealt with yet. So you're basically caught up in the past if you're down in these levels. So up here you're almost caught up with the leading edge of reality, and in here you have caught completely up with the leading edge. So anyway, that was how the model of reality and the soul and consciousness and mind interacts with it. So let's see below this model. I've written frequency. That is, I've calibrated the corresponding frequency to each main consciousness level as it corresponds to the above levels here. So you can see this is something I've never seen before. I always wanted to have this kind of frequency scale, because many people talk about frequency, like Bashar, for example. If you know about him, he talks a lot about frequency. So I wanted to just that's why I calibrated using dowsing rods to calibrate the corresponding frequency. And that by frequency is actual, it's physical. It's not just some made up stuff. What I mean by frequency is that each level of consciousness has a corresponding frequency that's higher and higher the higher you go, and it's actually the atoms or the molecules of your body that vibrates at that frequency. Yes, the frequency and your level of consciousness will vary throughout the day. It will not be stable and fixed all the time at one level, but you will still have a sort of an average base level that you sort of go back to, that your resting level, you might say. But if you get upset or angry or something, then you obviously drop momentarily down to a lower level. And you can also, if you meditate, you can spike up to higher levels, but you still have a base average level, which can be measured with dowsing rods or seen by intuitive people if you have knowledge of the scale, or with muscle testing. So now you also can know your frequency if you have if you follow this scale. And I also use percentage integrated. So that basically says how many percentage have you been integrated. It's starting at 1% at the lowest level, all the way up to 99%, and then you make the jump into non-duality and enlightenment, and then you're 100% integrated. So to be part of the Ascension bubble, or the Ascension the group who will ascend, all you have to do is be above 50% integrated. That means, like, let's say 51%. So somewhere around here, in the green, I guess. Not very high. I mean, emotionality, you don't have to be. That corresponds to 330 on this scale. So that's 51% integrated. That's 330. So it's a little bit up in the emotionality level. So you don't have to be all that high on the scale to be included, to be ascending. You're energetically ready to ascend and are ready for the event if you are at 330 or 51% integrated. Which, if you listen to this video, you most likely will be. And below, all the way down here, I have written, just to include sort of a Christian, context also, I've written hell for the demonic level, and purgatory from 200 until 500, and heaven from 500 and up. And also to include the Indian yogic terminology, I've included the tamas and rajas and sattva. And there are many interpretations of these. I just picked some of them that are most relevant. So tamas means entropy, darkness. Rajas means energy, activity. And sattva means clarity and peace. So, I think that's pretty much describes the scale, and I will obviously be using this scale a lot in the future videos to refer to it, and for many different purposes. So that's why I wanted to make a detailed, clear description of what this scale is about, so people can understand and go back and watch. And you can also find more about it on my website with a link in the description below. So thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.